If you keep repeating the past, there's something very important to look at that often goes overlooked. Repetition compulsion, which is the act of compulsively repeating dynamics of comfort and familiarity from childhood. It doesn't mean that it's what it is that you actually want, but what it means is that it is what it is that you're actually comfortable and familiar with. There's a key word here to explore that will be very interesting to break this all down. Familiarity, familial, family. That whole word familiar in and of itself is really derived in the origins of what it is that we're talking about here. Everything that you experienced in childhood tends to be kept alive through repetition compulsion. And I would argue that if you learned dynamics of a healthy childhood in childhood, then that's what it is that you're repeating. But of course, if you learned unhealthy, dysfunctional, fucked up dynamics in a survival based childhood where you likely experienced enmeshment, for instance, you actually have an unconscious and subconscious drive to keep those dynamics alive. You might see it in your personal habits that you're just not happy with. You might see it in your relationship or your relationships. Maybe you have a partner that is just not toxic, or that is just not healthy and is instead very toxic. Maybe your relationships, your friendships are very toxic. Maybe you feel like you don't really know why this is the case, but it's also very possible that you're out of touch with your fucked up childhood for many reasons. But the reality of the matter is that if you find yourself over and over and over again repeating the past, it's likely because you're on autopilot, stuck in repetition compulsion of an exceedingly dysfunctional childhood based in survival based dynamics. So, how do you go about changing this? Well, the reality of the matter is that first and foremost, you have to become aware of what it is that actually happened in your childhood. And of course, that is very much so meant to remain a boundaried matter, or multiple matters that are boundaried. But that in and of itself is the first thing that can help you determine why you are the way that you are. Our childhoods shape us. I've made many videos on the subject of psychoanalytic theory, Freudian psychology, talking about the model of the id, the ego, and the superego. And the reality of the matter is that if somebody had a dysfunctional childhood, the likelihood that their ego state was basically slaughtered is very high. And that entire dynamic of slaughtering is basically what brought somebody to attract over and over again repetition compulsions of dysfunctionality and exceedingly fucked up dynamics in their life. The first and foremost important step to changing any of this is to becoming aware of it. You really can't change that which you're not aware of. Oh, I am now aware that I attract unhealthy individuals, whether it be platonic or romantic relationships. What do I do about that? Well, first and foremost, recognize the difference between a healthy individual and an unhealthy individual. There is a difference. And when you actually look at an unhealthy individual, recognize the unhealthy characteristics and say to yourself, oh, wow, that's actually not attractive, because it's not. When you are stuck inside of relationships that are unhealthy and you believe that it's normal, it looks different than when you're outside of them after at least having done somewhat of work on yourself to recognize, oh, wow, yeah, very unhealthy. And it takes time. It doesn't just happen overnight. It's a process of recognizing that you don't actually, like, I'm not here to gaslight anybody. The chances that you're watching, the chances that you've been gaslighted if you're watching this video are rather high. But have you ever asked yourself It's a better way to approach it. Have you ever asked yourself if you actually like the things that you like, or if you actually enjoy doing the things that you're doing, or if you're just doing them because it's comfortable and familiar and you're actually just keeping survival based dysfunctional dynamics from childhood alive because it's comfortable and familiar? Maybe you've been taught to believe that you are unworthy, and with that, you are not deserving of love, like healthy love. So, what do? You seek out people that reinforce that belief inside of you that you are undeserving of healthy love. That is the repetition compulsion that was created, or I should say, the repetition compulsion that continues to repeat itself based on what was created for you in childhood. It doesn't mean that you're not actually deserving of love. It doesn't mean that you're not actually worthy of love. It just means that based on what it is that you've learned to believe about yourself, you seek and attract based on that. So you may have this belief that is on autopilot of unworth, and it's just attracting people that reinforce that belief. You would never put yourself in a position with somebody that reinforces the opposite of that, which is worthiness, because it doesn't click, it doesn't make sense, it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel familiar. The unworth feels familiar. The unhappiness feels familiar. The sadness feels familiar. The being overly invested in somebody else's mental and emotional well being feels familiar. Repetition compulsion is all about repeating the familiar dynamics from childhood. Its sole drive is to keep that alive. It's not interested in anything else, it just wants to keep that alive. So if you find yourself over and over again repeating comfortable and familiar dynamics of the past, look at your past, look at your childhood, get comfortable and familiar with it. It may be difficult to look at because it can be a very painful thing to face. But the reality is there is a lot there, and that in and of itself is like the entire picture to help you understand why you are the way that you are, why you do the things that you do, why you say the things that you say. Your childhood shaped you. If it shaped you to believe that you are unworthy, you are going to attract relationships that reinforce your belief that you are unworthy. You are going to attract abusive relationships that lead you to believe that that's what it is that you deserve, because that is the program that's running based on the dysfunctional and unhealthy childhood. The software that was installed was unworth. What you download, what you seek, what you create is based around that. Understanding that is the ticket out. Now, the question is, do you actually want that? I can imagine that the answer is probably no. Who the hell wants to live a life where they believe they are unworthy? And so that's where it comes down to understanding that you don't have to continue to repeat the past based on these familial dynamics that you were taught to believe that you are unworthy. You can see it for what it is and recognize, oh, wait a second, I'm not actually unworthy. I was just raised by these people that led me to believe that I was unworthy. And I've been chasing people that reinforce that same belief because it's comfortable, because it's familiar. And that's the reality of it. But the truth is that you are not unworthy. You are actually worthy of being loved. You deserve healthy dynamics in relationships where you can have your needs be met, and you don't have to starve yourself of things that you need. You don't have to do things. One of the biggest things that I think is so fascinating about this entire process of realizing, like actually sitting with it and being like, oh, wait a second. I've done all of these things that I don't actually want to do, or that I didn't actually want to do. And now I'm realizing I never had to do them. I only did them because I was raised in survival. I was raised in a way that had me repeating these behaviors of doing things that weren't authentic to me because I thought I had to in order to receive love or something, because that's a survival based dynamic. No, you don't have to. You don't have to do things that you don't want to do. You don't. And I think questioning why you would continue to do things that you don't want to do would be a massive step.